headspace to talk about trade in Canada? And do you think there'll be a meeting?
I think the principal discussions on trade are going to be held between Minister LeBlanc, our chief negotiator, Janice Charette, and their counterpart, Jameson Greer, Ambassador Greer, Secretary Besant. There'll be the principal aspects. This G7 is going to have as often happens with G7s, a very heavy geopolitical element to it, given very fluid events in the Gulf. And I would say, as we, on this fine day, trending in a positive direction, but one cannot take anything for granted, as well as Ukraine. Obviously, President Zelensky will be there, and a host of other important issues from global imbalances, which you don't have as a discussion just amongst bilaterally. You have to have it multilaterally, as well as AI safety. So I think the principle, to come back to the core of the answer, the principal discussions, our expectation, this is kind of in many respects the right way to do it at this stage, will be between the principal negotiators, which is going to happen en avion. En français, j'attends à ce que les
Yes, I am expecting that the trade discussions between Canada and the United States occur between the chief negotiator, Janice Charette, and Minister LeBlanc, and their counterparts, who are Ambassador Greer and colleague, because the G7 will be focused on geostrategic issues, including the Middle East, Ukraine, and the world imbalance, which is a fundamental multilateral issue, as well as developments related to artificial intelligence. Hello, Mr. Carney, Laurence Martin. Yes, just to continue on that theme, I'd like you to talk about the conflict with Iran, because the president had said it would only last a few weeks. We're seeing very serious economic impacts of this conflict around the world. Do you think it was a mistake on the part of the president to engage in this conflict with Iran? Well, first of all, the entire world is facing this situation, and what is important now is to lower the possibility of a nuclear threat, including for Iran's neighbors, and try to establish some stability on oil markets and other commodity markets as well. So this is no time to be thinking about the past. The president made that decision, and the Iranians for decades have been making threats. So we're in that situation now, and there is the possibility of a ceasefire, and in my view, and according to the president and other G7 leaders and leaders across that region, what is needed now is to work honestly and sincerely on strengthening that opportunity for peace. Now, there are a lot of Canadians who are saying morally it's completely unacceptable what Mr. Trump did in Iran. Well, the moral choice right now is to stop the conflict. That is Canada's objective, to put an end to this conflict and to strengthen the opportunity of reaching a ceasefire and eventually peace in the region, including in Lebanon.
We take the situation where we are today and look forward from that. I'm going to combine the answers. The moral choice is to do everything we can to establish a ceasefire and build that into a durable ceasefire and ultimately peace in the region, including Lebanon. Canada will do whatever we can in order to support that. Part of supporting that, of course, is to reduce the threats from Iran and its proxies against its neighbors, and that's a broad definition, as well as the nuclear threat. So there are encouraging signs as we meet here today, and I think the responsibility of the G7 is, and the other actors who are coming, regional powers who are coming, is to do what we can to build on that progress that has been established.
Prime Minister Michael Couture with CTV News. Despite what you mentioned in your preamble about what you've been able to accomplish on this leg of the trip, there has been criticism from the leader of the opposition saying that what Canada already has a trade deal with Ireland, and what you're doing on this leg of the trip is not at all helping Canadian workers whose jobs are affected by tariffs from the United States. I wanted to get your response to that.
Well, we have a couple of things. We have a trade deal with Ireland, but we don't have full ratification of the trade deal with Ireland. So one of the things that, and I want to commend the Taoiseach and the government for putting this in place, is that both houses of the Irish legislature have now ratified that deal. Now, ratification provides additional certainty. It provides additional mechanisms for the long term in terms of that. That's the first point. The second is that we are not satisfied with the status quo. Maybe the leader of the opposition is, but we're not satisfied with the status quo. We see a significant opportunity with Ireland, more broadly with the European Union, to deepen our commercial relationships with them. And I speak more in this regard with respect to the European Union than Ireland, given Ireland's neutrality, but with the European Union, to broaden our security relationships, defense and security relationships. Ireland will be president of the European Union for the next starting from Canada Day. It's a crucial time in that regard, and they're putting the focus on, during that period of time, competitiveness. That means deeper commercial relationships is one aspect. Reducing red tape is another aspect as part of that. And it also putting a focus on security and values and the link between those. So it comes together at a time where there's an enormous opportunity. And I would remind that the scale of this economy, the European economy, is absolutely enormous. This is an economy of more than 400 million people. It's one of the richest economies, and it is underpenetrated by Canadian businesses. Now, one of the reasons why that is, in fact, you can do different analyses of this, but directionally, the opportunity for Canada in Europe is as big as if not bigger than any other economy. Now, to explain to the leader of the opposition, who will try to clip that and not follow through, add this. Opportunity means what more? What more can you get? How more can we grow from where we are today? And the fact is, it can be measured in hundreds of billions of dollars of opportunity that we have not, as a country, fully taken advantage of. And by deepening our relationships, by making it simpler to do business in Ireland, in Europe, we create enormous opportunity for Canadian jobs. I will just underscore two recent examples. One, OpenText, 2 days ago, 100 million investment here, which ultimately benefits a great Canadian company in integration. And then the $18 billion purchase of Airbus planes manufactured in Quebec. That's because of our fluid relationship with Europe, our seamless relationship with Europe, that we can be that competitive in it. And there are many, many more examples of that.
In French, on your message to Mr. Poilievre. Well, the opportunity doesn't mean status quo. It means going further, getting more, having more ambition. It means recognizing the opportunities in the largest economy in the world. And Canada is stronger when it's diversified, or better diversified. It has a great opportunity to diversify, but the largest opportunity is China. Well, not necessarily, because we don't want a trade relationship with China that is completely open, according to the government. Mr. Poilievre may have a different view. And in terms of India, we are currently pursuing a free trade agreement with India, and we've made a lot of progress, and it's very encouraging. And of course, there's the European Union. We're making progress there now.
Last question, Dana Question.
Hello, Prime Minister. David Cochran with CBC News. Yesterday at Trinity College, in the conversation after your speech, you said that one of the consequences of the rupture in the global order was that AI is essentially being developed in an unregulated environment in many ways. And you outlined the human risk and the structural risks that were there. The United States has just blocked access to Anthropic's latest AI models to foreign nationals and foreign countries. What message should Canadian companies, European companies who may have been building out their businesses, wanting to rely on American tech, take from that? What is your response on behalf of the Canadian government, and how do you address this at the United Nations, where AI is going to be, or sorry, at the G7?
At the G7. I would suggest let's start with the G7 before we go to the United Nations. Well, thank you, David, for the question. This is an incredibly important issue. I'm hopeful we will make some progress on the issue at this G7. I commend President Macron for putting it foursquare and on the agenda. I don't think there will not be a mission accomplished banner that comes out of the G7 because the issues are complex, they're multifaceted, but we need to make some progress on them, and that's Canada's intention, and I think people are coming with the spirit of goodwill. That's the first point. Second point, if I speak specifically to the issue you raised with Mythos and Fable, Anthropic models, I'll say the following. We are in contact with our American colleagues. There's good flow of information there. There are some risks that they have identified, and I understand, the American authorities taking those risks seriously, which is why they've taken a step. And it shows to the core of your question the risks that we all are running, even with the best intentions, how fast AI is developing, and for it to evolve in an uncoordinated fashion. So the question is, where do we go from here? And what does a country like Canada do? What does the European Union do? UK and others? Well, again, you're going to hear me say this over and over again because it's true. It is never a good idea to have one option. It is never a good idea to have one option. If I took one lesson from the financial crisis, is we had a series of financial institutions which were linked up in one way, and as soon as one of them started having problems, you feared that everybody was about to have problems. And I say this in Ireland, which suffered greatly from that. We have similar things in terms of model risk. If you only have one large language model and a reliance on that, you can have it in intelligence, infrastructure, and other aspects. So how do we move from where we are today, where there's lots of promise around this, but how do we move from where we are today, where there is redundancy, there's diversification from our perspective? I'll take two more quickly. I'll try and be quick because you've got the sun, and I worry about that. You invested it. But so how do we diversify and build that out? For us, that means that partnering. Again, this is where it comes in, why it's important. So we have the capability, not just ourselves, but especially ourselves, plus a few other like-minded, to build some redundancy in that system. And this is a much longer conversation, obviously, but that's part of the reason why we're so focused on building out these relationships with the French. President Macron and I spent 45 minutes on this issue in quite some depth on Friday night. It's been part of the discussions here. It'll be part of the discussions with the European presidents on Monday afternoon, I guess, whenever I'm seeing them tomorrow, I guess. So to be continued, I'm happy to have the discussion. I guess I would just leave it with this point, which is that the situation we're in collectively right now with Mythos and Fable and is something that can happen with over-reliance on certain models or certain protections. That doesn't ascribe nobody's done anything wrong in this situation. But we will have done something wrong if we just accept this, don't take the lesson, don't build out and diversify. And you can make an analog to Canada's overall economic situation. We will be doing something wrong if we just sit here and say, to go back to, I think, the very first question, well, why would you come and deepen your trade relationship with Europe? Well, because we don't want to have just one big trade relationship. That's better for Canadians. No, sorry.
Hi, Catherine Morrison with the Canadian Press, and I don't want you to worry, I have been applying sunscreen today.
It's good. Your parents have been on the line, and they've been concerned.
You said yesterday that the strands of a new world order could be woven at the G7, and you've previously also said that the new world order will be built out of Europe. I'm just wondering, what is the role, and how do you see the U.S. fitting into that new world order?
I think it's. I think the way I'd phrase it, which is the same for the United States and European Union, Korea, other countries will be around, Brazil, be around the table, the Gulf states, is what are you for? What are you opting in for? What do you want to build out? Do you, to Mr. Cochrane's question just now, do we take this risk seriously around AI and AI infrastructure? So do you want to be part of the solution for that? Some of us will take Canada very much at the forefront. We'll take child safety seriously and feel that laissez-faire is not the answer to child safety. And so we will take steps. Not everyone around that table will. In some of those circumstances, the United States will be foursquare behind and in many cases lead, but not all. And so what one can't do at this point in a rapidly shifting world order is to rely on one set of institutions, one grouping, one country to provide the answers. You have to know what you want, what you need, how you serve your citizens, and then go out and get it. Sur quel aspect, madame?
Sur votre stratégie au G7, oui.
On your strategy at the G7.
L'approche c'est le variable geometry.
The approach involves variable geometry.
Ad hoc.
In other words, ad hoc solutions, not necessarily the same solution each time on each issue. A general comprehensive strategy. So we're looking for partners and we're finding partners, a lot of partners. And if I can just close on the poem I quoted from. The world is looking to Canada, as in the past. It's not easy, but there are opportunities, a number of opportunities to create partnerships on the most important issues for Canadians.
Oh, okay. Wait.
Hi, Prime Minister.
Is it en charge? Oui. Hi, Kate.
Kate McKenna, CBC News. On Friday, there was some reporting in both CBC and the New York Times that NATO, or that rather the U.S. is planning to potentially pull a third of the fighter jets on offer to Europe for NATO in the coming months. I'm just wondering what's your reaction to that?
I confess that's I hadn't seen that reporting. You mean a third of the prospective future fighter jets, not the U.S. deployment of fighter jets in.
I think it's actually the existing.
The existing deployment. Is that it? Sorry, David.
From 150 to 100, and there's
of the existing U.S. deployment is the reporting. Well, okay. So the first aspect of my answer is I don't know, because obviously I hadn't even read the story, nor had I had a discussion or, to my knowledge, have the Minister of National Defense or Chief Defense Staff had discussions within a NATO context of a potential, I'll call it a redeployment from the U.S. What I do know is that all NATO members, Canada included, need to take more and more responsibility for their defense. We also, and this is where it gets sensitive, taking responsibility for our defense, taking responsibility for Arctic, our coastlines, etc. Yes, absolutely. More and more share of the responsibility for the defense of our allies. We are prepared to do that within an ally context, so not on our own, not bilaterally. And you will have seen that we've stepped up with in the Baltics and Latvia in Operation Reassurance. We're obviously stepping up with the Arctic. In the Arctic, we're stepping up with a prudent, pragmatic, but significant increase in our in our defense spending. I expect the NATO leaders meeting in the middle of July, to focus on aspects of this burden sharing. And Canada is beginning to and willing to take more of our responsibilities, certainly first and foremost at home, but where we can be most effective within NATO. And I'll finish on this, which is particularly in the Arctic-Baltic corridor. I don't mean exclusively, but there are a lot of synergies. And again, if someone's wondering why we've been spending a lot of time with the Norwegians, the Germans, the Baltic states, the Swedes, the Finns, and the French actually as well, and UK, is that all of those nations within NATO actually play an important role. So if we're going to do this right and do it effectively, it means more intensive cooperation amongst that group of countries. Denmark, I apologize to Denmark, that group of countries within a NATO context. So that's strategically or directionally is where things are going. Okay? Great. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. This concludes our press conference. Ceci conclut notre conférence de presse.
Okay, that is the Prime Minister of Canada in County Mayo, Ireland, where his paternal grandparents are from, where they immigrated from back in 1921, I believe, to come to Canada, taking a lot of questions about what he's been doing over the past number of days and setting the stage for where he's going next, which is the G7 hosted by France, where he expects, as he said, that it will be geopolitics that will be the focus of conversations, notably whether or not a deal will be had by the United States and Iran. The president was just posting about that on social media again now, but also taking some questions about artificial intelligence, because that too is also on the agenda for the G7. Let's bring back our Sunday Scrum to talk a little bit more about what we heard there from the Prime Minister. Tana McCharles, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, Emily Nicolas, columnist for Le Devoir, and Jason Markusoff, a producer and writer for CBC News. He's in Ottawa today. I don't have a lot of time because the Prime Minister took most of it, but that's okay. We were supposed to talk about the online harms bill, but because the Prime Minister just talked about AI, I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about what we would expect to hear coming out of this G7 meeting. It doesn't sound like, from what he's saying, there will be some universal statement, but he does sound as though he wants to see some sort of progress on it, realizing that there are some challenges because of what has happened with Anthropic and the United States government saying there was potential security risks there. Tonda, what stood out to you in terms of what he said on that front?
I mean, I think AI was among a couple of other topics, defense and trade, where he talked about, working with like-minded countries and towards common goals. And I think at this G7, what he's signaling is that despite the fact that he agrees with perhaps Macron and others in terms of regulating AI and the big tech companies, that there's a tension there, right? And he's flagging very quickly right now that, he dubbed even the approach on what you should assume is a common goal, protecting children online or child safety online. He flagged, our approaches were dedicated to that versus a laissez-faire approach. And that signals that, look, they view the U.S. Approach to how to regulate AI, chatbots, social media, as something that somewhat steps back from the responsibilities that the other G7 partners are, I think, embracing. Right. But in all of this, I think, the tension between the other G7 partners and some of the guest countries and the U.S. are going to become very apparent in the next few days.
Yeah, I mean, AI is just one area where there'll be that tension point, Emily, but certainly the Prime Minister wants to talk Ukraine. The President of Ukraine will be there. A lot of focus will be on, I would imagine, whether or not this deal with Iran actually happens, because there is also some concern, as expressed by the President just now, about what's happening with Lebanon. The back and forth there between Israel and Lebanon and getting that to stop at the same time. But Emily, when the Prime Minister talked about AI and he said, this is what happens if you have an over-reliance on one model. And in this case, nobody's done anything wrong yet. What did you take from that in terms of what his concerns are around things moving too quickly down that road?
Yeah, there's two things. There's over-reliance on one model, but there's also over-reliance on one country. I'd say that one of the biggest transformation that we've seen over the past 20 years is how, the GAFAM domination, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, and all the other guys, Microsoft, just how all happen to be based in the U.S. and how those companies have taken over our lives, and how there is now a collision basically between essentially what we see as private sector, economic, large corporations, and the White House and U.S. national interests in a way that is unprecedented. And especially since Donald Trump has come to the White House, there's not even a theater trying to shy away from the fact that those CEOs are being aligned with the White House, and we've seen the whole spectacle with Elon Musk. Now, when it comes to AI, it's the same thing where you have this technology that is about to, or has started to disrupt the ways our societies are organized, the way work is organized. And so much of it is controlled by just this one country. And if you look at history, that's never good news, that there's one country controlling a technology or a resource that is affecting all of the world. And so when it comes to AI and ethics and regulation, there's two things. There's the coalition between Washington, the collision of interest between Washington and the national interests and the private companies. But there's also, and that's what I think the G6 basically is trying to look into. But there's also the ethical issues that people here in Montreal with AI ethics researchers have been calling about for years. And that's not necessarily something that Mark Carney or Macron are interested into that much. They want the development, but they want to benefit from the development as well. Well, there are also a lot of ethical researchers who've been saying this is happening too fast, not just because it's DC control, but because there are ethical issues there that are not being solved by Mark Carney inclusively.
Jason, I have about a minute left for you.
So it was really interesting to see how he. I mean, that talk about let's not have one option. I mean, that was the big he didn't mean it. He didn't say it in his initial comments, but as he spoke about it contemporaneously in his speech, he seemed like that he realized that was one of his big kind of overarching comments, that we don't need one reliable thing. When Mark Carney talks about wanting this new world order, what he seems to be really talking about is that we need to go back to go club among the people who believe in the rules-based order, the nations that believe in the rules-based order, which is over, which U.S. is increasingly not a part of, that China and often India are not a part of, and there are these other seemingly fickle, unreliable nations or groups that operate like nation states, which are the big tech companies, which Canada has learned can burn you and try to pressure you on various things. So as Canada tries to group together with those reliable countries and expand trade, expand collaboration with them, become stronger with them as opposed to being overly aligned and becoming a sort of client state with U.S., that will be able to work more with those ad hoc and have more leverage to make useful deals and useful arrangements that work with or work despite of the hegemons.
You did perfectly with timing. Thank you all for all your smart thoughts and for sticking around for the PM. Appreciate it. Tonda McCharles, Emily Nicola, Jason Markisoff. Thanks, everybody. We'll be right back. We're going to talk more about AI and what the government is trying to do to ban social media and control AI chatbots. Excuse me. I'll speak to BC Premier David Eby after this. Stick around. federal government has unveiled its legislation meant to protect children online. It's called the Safe Social Media Act. We were talking about it a little bit earlier. It would mean a social media ban for those under 16 and eventually a new digital regulator to enforce the law. Earlier, I spoke with BC Premier David Eby about the legislation and what more he would like to see. BC Premier David Eby, nice to see you again.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about this because you have talked about it a lot and had very particular expectations around what the federal government would put forward to protect kids online. I want to start not with the ban, but with what the government is planning to do with chatbots, AI chatbots. They are not going to require companies to report interactions to police, whether it's someone expressing ideas of suicide or death. But there is sort of a process where these companies will have to show when they've dealt with things or how they've dealt with things. What do you make of that? Does that go as far as you would like it to?
We have a really straightforward ask from British Columbia, and it's not an abstract ask, and it's not, a theoretical ask. It comes out of the terror and the horror that we saw in Tumbler Ridge and the allegations about OpenAI that followed. Here's a school shooting where families were devastated, children were murdered, and following that event, very serious allegations published in an American national newspaper that OpenAI had a group of people inside the company that knew that this was going to happen, made a strong argument that the company should go to police and report it, and the company chose not to do that. Now, those are really serious allegations. They haven't been proven, but troubling, deeply troubling to us in the province and to the families, and opened up this question of when do these companies report? And what is their level of involvement if a chatbot is involved in a crime like this? They've essentially provided the vehicle by which the murderer, the killer, became more efficient. And so if that is a company's involvement, is there criminal culpability? Is there civil liability? What is the obligation on the company to come forward and report? And what was very clear to us is that the answer was way too uncertain to be accepted. These companies have to have a bright line test imposed on them by the federal government that requires them to bring this information forward, full stop. And someone is using a chatbot to plan a violent crime against others, credibly, the company believes that that is the case, they have to report. Full stop, that should be the law, not a complicated reporting mechanism. And we're going to be pushing the federal government on that. I don't want to say we don't like the bill, we do. There are lots of parts of the bill we like. This is a miss.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the social media ban for Canadians under 16. It's going to take some time to get it all in place, the legislation passed, and then, of course, the regulator to put in place. But did that seem like something that you wanted? Does that go far enough for you on that front?
Yeah, and it's so terrible, but I know that this is the case across the country. We've had horrific cases here as well on these social media apps. We had the case of Carson Cleland, a young boy in Prince George, incredibly talented young man, was going to go far, had an interaction over a period of about 3 hours with an account on Snapchat, no connection to him, using a cloaked connection through a VPN from Nigeria. And Snapchat allowed that connection to take place for that person to contact Carson. And within 3 hours, the damage was done and Carson ended up taking his own life. And so, these are devastating stories and underline the importance of this work. And I don't believe the social media companies when they say they don't know that this is happening or they couldn't possibly prevent it. And so fully supportive of the proposal that if these companies refuse to put the safeguards in place, they should not have any access to children, full stop. Also, I am, as a parent, I really don't want my kids on social media. But I also understand that they may or their friends may access less safe alternatives if there's no option, because what we've seen in Australia following their ban. Yeah. So it's a complicated area. I think the federal government on that piece has struck the right balance. And we do have to impose obligations on these companies, as well as recognize that there are some positive aspects to these things when they're safe and protected for kids, and we can deal with issues of bullying and predators and other pieces, which I know we can deal with, but the companies have to be forced to deal with.
Just to go back to the AI chatbots for a moment, I think the government was looking for a way to have some regulations but not interfere with people's privacy? Obviously, I take what you're saying, and everyone wants to avoid tragedy, but do you understand the concerns about getting involved in sort of monitoring and surveying people's actions and their right to privacy?
Well, I guess if the companies weren't already doing it, then maybe we could have that conversation. But they are doing it. Sure. They're using the information you put into the chatbots to train the next generation of chatbots. They're using the information that you put in to prepare the large language models for the next iteration. They're already watching, they're already recording and keeping the information. The allegation is that OpenAI had full awareness of what was going on. They had appropriately flags internally to bring to their attention that this kind of activity was taking place. And so in that environment where the technology exists, allegations are not just that the technology exists, but that it actually flagged the activity and the company was aware, then I think it's appropriate to put the obligation on the company to bring it forward. Why they think that it would be appropriate to have a regime where the flag comes up and then someone unaccountable in a boardroom somewhere whose primary relationship is with shareholders, not with the affected families and victims, why that person should get to make the call instead of the government saying, nope, full stop, you got to let us know. I'm not sure why that argument carries any water with anyone. That's why I think a national standard is required.
Okay, I want to ask you about trade if I can, because you did have that first minister's call this week. Donald Trump has said he may not want to go forward with the review of CUSMA, which you called pretty lame. Do you take these threats seriously that he could not renew, or do you think this is bluster?
I mean, I don't know what to take seriously or not with the president. What we can look at is the broad trends. And the broad trends are that the United States wants to become more insular. They want to impose massive duties on Canadian companies wherever possible. We've seen it particularly in our softwood sector here in British Columbia. And that imposes on us an obligation to face outwards to the rest of the world. I believe very strongly in the argument that I've heard, including from senior members of the federal administration, the Prime Minister, that bad deal is not something that we should take when no deal is available. No deal is okay. We have 85% of our goods that are duty-free between the countries, and we should use this time to diversify away from the United States wherever we can, while recognizing incredibly hard to replace that market. For myself, for example, I'm off to China at the end of the month. I've been in Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, Korea. These are countries that also want to trade with us. We have a huge new deal. I will credit the Prime Minister, a $10 billion deal with Germany around LNG sales from British Columbia through a facility that we're working on with the Nisga'a First Nation. This is the kind of work that we need to be doing together, just given the unreliability and the inconsistency of the messaging coming from the United States.
Okay. David Eby, always nice of you to make the time. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
We were just talking about trade there with the Premier. Well, things are heating up a little bit on broadly as well. The Trump administration pausing the opening of that key bridge linking Canada and the U.S.
Was that the request of the U.S. administration? We'll look to work through what issues they have.
So where do talks go from here? I'll speak with the former Canadian ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman, next. You're watching Rosemary Barton Live. Donald Trump revived his threat to not renew the CUSMA agreement with Canada and Mexico.
We don't need anything that Canada has. We don't need anything that Mexico has, but they need everything that we have. And they have to treat us better. You know, with Mexico and Canada, we have trade deficits. We should have surpluses with them. We don't need their cars. We don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We don't need anything that they have.
U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer also weighed in on the state of the talks, blaming Canada for the little progress that's been made so far. Despite the accusations from the U.S., Prime Minister Mark Carney says he's already made offers to Trump as an effort to avoid and resolve trade disputes going forward. Talks are still ongoing, are expected to extend beyond the upcoming July 1st deadline. Kirsten Hillman is Canada's former ambassador to the United States, and I spoke to her earlier. And former Ambassador Kirsten Hillman joins me now. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Rosie.
I'm going to pick your brain about a lot of different things now that you're not right in the midst of everything, but still have a lot of deep knowledge about it. And I want to start with Donald Trump's comments this week, saying that he wasn't sure he wanted to renew CUSMA. First of all, how seriously do you take that threat? And what does it practically mean?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question because there's a lot of words around this process that we're heading into. So the CUSMA agreement has a clause that says that on July 1st, the parties will come together and decide whether or not they want to renew the agreement. And if they decide to do that, then it remains in place for 16 years. Right. If all three of them do not decide, there isn't consensus to renew, then it remains in place for 10 years while the parties try to negotiate changes and modifications that would lead them to be able to build consensus to renew for 16 years. Okay. So a bit of a complicated process, but it means that July 1st isn't a do or die date. It also means that the president saying he doesn't want to renew does not mean that the CUSMA goes away. It means that we enter into a discussion with the Americans. Canada's already said publicly that we'd like to renew. Mexico has said that they would like to renew. But all three countries have to agree, and so it looks like we're going to be in a discussion period for a while.
And if we are not renewing, the negotiations just continue for a long period of time until we get to a place where everyone agrees?
I mean, potentially they could. I don't think any party would want them to continue, for 10 years, certainly. But I think that they can. Okay. We'll just keep going until we get to where we want to go. The reason I don't think it'll take, it'll go on forever is that from the U.S. side, and that's the country that's looking for some changes, there are very specific things that they want to do based on their overall trade agenda, the Trump trade agenda. So I would think they'd be motivated to, work with us to get to a deal.
When Donald Trump said in those same comments that the U.S. doesn't need anything from Canada, we've heard that kind of thing before. How do you read that? Is that just posturing by the president and not a real thing that he believes?
Well, that's hard to say. Yeah. But I think it is certainly part of it is posturing. Part of it is saying, the way in which we have been integrated since 1989, Canada-US FTA, is not his, let's say, de facto choice. In other words, we have chosen as two countries since the FTA that to integrate where possible, to work on integration because that adds to our competitiveness and the efficiency of our supply chains. That's not his starting point, right? So I think when he says things like that, he's articulating his starting point vision, which is the U.S. can do things on its own and doesn't need to do things with other countries. And the exception is more, where there's strategic benefits and where we can, we will.
I know you're not at the table and know the detail of what's going on, but Dominic LeBlanc says that when they were there a week ago now, they were able to remove a dozen or so irritants. And it sounded from what he was saying that Ambassador Greer saw some progress. What does that indicate to you? That will things move faster as we get towards Canada Day? Do you think that the Americans are getting serious and down to business? What does that tell you?
Well, I certainly think the Americans are serious and down to business. They also have a lot of things on their plate. Jamieson Greer has a lot of negotiations that he and his team are doing at any one time. So this is really the only one that our country is doing. Yes. So our sense of pacing is always going to be a little more speedy, or what we'd like to see will be a little more speedy, and we will have a little bit more bandwidth than they will given the number of things that they're working on. So the U.S. has always been quite clear to us around trade-related issues that they would like to resolve. Some of those are published every year.
Yep.
Some of them are just part of normal conversations that we have with them. So when Minister LeBlanc talks about resolving some of these issues, it would be some of these perpetual issues that have kind of been irritating between our countries. Presumably behind the scenes, they've been talking those through. The government has been able to say, okay, we understand that that's a bit of a problem for you. What if we modify it this way? Or is that regulation being applied in a way that's not, it's complicated for your exporters? Tell us about that. Let's see what we can do. I expect it's that kind of technical conversation.
The fact that, in the past week, the Prime Minister has, the Minister of Heritage has pulled back on the streaming fees from CRTC. They've just tabled a bill on forced labor, which is an issue that the President has also pointed to. Do you see those as concessions? Or just Canada and the government being sensitive to issues that they have talked about?
Well, I think I actually would start with some of those things. Certainly the forced labor legislation. That's a commitment that Canada has made quite a long time ago in the CUSMA or USMCA renegotiations.
Right.
But before that, and we have had challenges with implementation. And so I think the Prime Minister has recognized that and sought to address that. I think that is a Canada for Canada issue, in my opinion. And based on my experience, this is something that we believe in, and it's a policy choice that we've made. As far as some of the Streaming Act and other things, again, that's a process that had been through with the CRTC and government and the interaction between the government and the CRTC. Those are things that evolve. Certainly, the government is sensitive to the U.S. position on these issues. They would be, obviously important parts of the conversation that the government is having with the United States. But again, in all of these policies, it is a question of communicating to the United States Canada's policy objective, trying to understand the way in which it's difficult for them, and trying to find a way to sort of square that circle, if you will.
I will ask about the bridge, and again, I don't know that we exactly know what's going on there. The Prime Minister has talked about technical issues. Certainly the President has said publicly he doesn't like the way this has been set up. We've paid for it, and so we're getting the money back, at least at first. Is that, I don't know how you think of whether he's using it as leverage. Is that the kind of thing the President would use as leverage in a negotiation?
Possibly, yes. He has a very, his way of negotiating takes on sort of issues outside of the straight trade domain, and we've seen that since the get-go. Not necessarily the way our government would traditionally have done things, but he's our partner, and we take the partner that we're working with, and obviously we'll figure that out. So I can answer the question on that. I do think it's inevitable that this bridge is. I mean, it's very good for the United States. It's very good for the fact that us as their biggest trading customer, their biggest customer, and that being the busiest point of entry for U.S. exports into Canada, this will get resolved. These things do get resolved. The specifics of it, I'm just not aware of.
What would you say to Canadians then who are watching and see these kinds of issues crop up week to week as we get nearer to that deadline, and the government is not disclosing a whole lot about what's happening behind closed doors? That seems to be the Prime Minister's approach. We're going to negotiate in private. What would you say to Canadians then who are like, "What is this ever going to get solved? How do we deal with this guy?"
I would say a few things. One, I suspect there will be more, statements that seem controversial, actions that may be difficult, posturing or not posturing, actual actions that are complicated between now and when we get a deal. There are always bumps in the road in a negotiation, and there will be in this one. And I think Canadians need to be confident that the Prime Minister, his team, the Minister, the Chief Negotiator, the provinces that they're working closely with, the industry that they're working closely with, there's a plan, they're implementing that plan, and we can't get distracted by the tactics of the other side. That's a key ability to succeed will be to be able to keep our eye on the ball, and there's everything in place to be able to do that. So I think it's important to take the rhetoric of negotiations with a grain of salt and have confidence that we will get there. And the reason I'm confident we'll get there, and it'll be different. It'll be different than we had before. There's no doubt about that. But the reason I'm confident we'll get there is because in the United States, the business community, at the political level, there is really almost complete support for what they call the USMCA, the CUSMA. And so, people are elected to represent the interests of their communities, their business community, and I think they will do that.
Thank you for coming in and for explaining a lot of things to us.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're going to take a short break here. RBL will be right back. Stick around. The G7 gets underway tomorrow. Over the next couple of days, Mark Carney and other leaders will make their way to Evian-les-Bains, which is in France, to talk about, as the Prime Minister said earlier today, Iran, Ukraine, and AI, and whether there can be some joint approach to how to regulate it. That is Rosemary Barton Live for this Sunday. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you back here next Sunday, if not before. Have a great day.